Welcome all to the Dharamsala International Film Festival. This year is our 10th edition, and we're so excited to have you all here. Um, we are very, very excited about this panel because we have the makers, both the directors and the producers of Uljan and Shoebox. These films are premiering at DIF online, and you're going to be able to see them till Sunday, the 14th. So, really, really thrilled to have you here. Thank you for joining us. Making an independent feature is a really tough job. It requires vision, persistence, a lot of love, and the right collaborators. And I'm really looking forward to, as the rest of us, watching this, to hearing your stories and sharing them with us. Thank you for doing that. I'm going to hand over to Avni Batra, who is an amazing film professional and a great friend of DIF, and she will now take over. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's absolutely my pleasure to be here. I'm sad we're not actually in the mountains, but hopefully we get there next year with little hot toddies and do this in person. Thank you, Ashish, Karthike, Faraz, Nupur, all of you for your time. I know you're sitting out in New York, Ashish, so thank you very much. I'm going to start by just asking you the most obvious question, which is, I think Ritu's already sort of set it in motion for us, and which is that making any film, in my opinion, is really difficult. And making an independent film and a first film is perhaps even harder. So what was the beginnings of your journeys? Whichever of you would like to go first, I'm happy for you to start. And I'll ask maybe the directors this question first. Ashish?
You're on mute.
I think you're muted.
Yeah.
Firstly, thank you so much, Ritu, Radha, and Avni, for giving us this opportunity for, giving Uljan a platform at DIF to reach audiences in India. I really appreciate it, and so does Karthike. So it's a real pleasure to be here. As Ritu said, that making an independent film is really difficult, and as you said, I would say, yeah, it's a miracle. And you said it's difficult to make a first film, and I'd say probably because you don't realize how crazy it's going to be, you still do it. I think making the second one's probably harder because now you know what you're signing up for. In terms of our film, I would say there were two people who were central to getting the film made. One is here, which is Karthike, without whose inspiration and execution I would have probably raised my hands at some stage. And the other was Christopher Zala, who's also a producer, who was involved with the sort of the inspiration part. He was the first one here in the US who read the script and said, you should go ahead and we should definitely make this movie. So, I met Karthike at Film Bazaar, the co-production market, and I'd seen his work prior to the Film Bazaar, and I, approached him and I said, look, you're the person I really want to work with. And he was there with Sony in the work in progress labs, and he said, oh my God, another crazy guy. So he tried, he told me, I don't have time. And I think I was like that housefly that just never goes away. And he thought it was easiest to just read the script to get rid of me. And then I still didn't go away. And so that's how we got together and ended up making the film. But that's kind of the origins. It was Film Bazaar. Without NFDC's help, I don't think we would have been able to make the film. And
you wrote the script yourself,
yes.
I understand. And how was that? Go ahead.
So I wrote I started writing the script when I was a MFA student at Columbia, and my screenwriting professor, they read the script and said, you should really pursue it. It seems like something personal, and he was very encouraging. So there were a lot of people who kind of goaded me on through the process.
And I also read in your press kit that Christopher, did he read it as a favor to a friend?
Yeah. So Chris and I have been friends for a very long time. Chris is a very, successful filmmaker here in the US, and he's always been someone who's like a mentor to me. So I sent him the script, he read it, and he was very encouraging. So yeah, I think at all these fault points, I could have at some stage, without the encouragement of people I respected, including Karthikeya, I think I might have raised my hands, because as you said, it's really a daunting process to undertake, and you really need people behind you saying, no, it's worth believing in it, and just go on.
I guess the next thing is, did you have to shop it around, or did it sort of all just magically?
No, far from it. As Ritu was mentioning, starting at Film Bazaar, where we did get a lot of interest in the co-production market. We had about 35 meetings in 5 days, which was great. That's why NFDC was so critical. And so with that process, a French producer, Elan Gerard, came on board, who really liked the script. And subsequent to that, so he got involved with the project. And then there were people in, that I had known in the past, who I approached. And so the financing really came from private sources, taking the script around. I must have met at least, 50 people trying to, get interest. And, there were sort of very many different sort of levels of progression with every conversation, right? And so that's why it took about 3 years from the moment I started shopping it around to get everything together. We started shooting in 2019, whereas the script was written in 2016.
So one of the most intriguing things for me as a filmmaker and producer also is why people actually get attached to your project. You go out and tell them, listen, hey, it's my first film. I don't have a lot of money, but there's something that sparks the interest. And I can understand if the actors or crews, but how did you spark the interest of your financiers? Because I think for most new filmmakers, that's the magical question is, what is it about you, the script, the team, and maybe Karthikeya, you can weigh in. What is it that sparks that fire in somebody to put money behind you? What was it in your case, perhaps?
We're very fortunate. Ashish had shopped the script on a lot. He had a lot of friends. So by the time I stepped onto the project and I agreed to do it, the finance was pretty much in place. So all I had to do is meet the people who were interested, and they had to feel convinced that, okay, Ashish is partnered up with somebody now, that it will all come together well, and then the money came through. So because I stepped on the project as late as 2019, so he already had people who were deeply interested in financing the film, and I think I stepped on board, and then it all just smoothly moved ahead. And but again, means every project has its own set of things which need to come in place. So I think that's how simple it was. He'd done a lot of hard work before he approached me. So yeah, I was the lucky one. I didn't have to shop around too much to raise too much finance for the film. I just had to convince people who already had the finance that yes, let's do this, and let's do this now, and it should be done immediately. So that's.
And Faraz, parallelly, what was your experience like?
So our journey started somewhere in 2015, 2016. And that time, the idea wasn't really to make a film per se. I had met Faraz, and Faraz and I go a long way because we studied from the same college. I went to study arts and he went to study law. And Faraz was keen in photography, and I kept visiting his house in Delhi. And we kept talking about, in general films. And we were basically cinephiles. We would just meet up to watch films, or in general, stay in touch talking about films. Somewhere in the year 2015-16, he told me about a fellowship that's run by Werner Herzog. And he told me that I must write to him. And at the same time, I was also in touch with Nupur. So I got in touch with Nupur and I told Nupur that, I have this body of work and I want to write to him with this idea that I have in my mind. So basically, to get through the fellowship, you need to write an essay, and you also need to, present an idea that you ultimately want to turn into a film, along with a lot of other things, assignments that you do. So finally, I applied for that and I got through. And in the year 2017, I went for that fellowship program. In that fellowship program, it brought in a lot of clarity, because at different stages, I felt very differently. Initially, I for a very long time, I wanted to make a film just on the, bungalows of Allahabad. And then, at the same time, parallelly, I was also thinking of doing a documentary on the fading single screen theaters in Uttar Pradesh. When none of those were working out, I also thought of collaborating with a friend of mine who's a photographer, and thought of doing a coffee table book on just the architecture of a single screen theater. But after my fellowship with Werner Herzog, I think things completely changed, because my interactions with him and what he made me understand about what I wanted to do really shaped up the project. And from then, I think it was no looking back, because Faraz was always interested in producing the film. So we really didn't go a lot of places pitching the film, except for finally bringing the film to NFDC Film Bazaar. But I think it was the year 2017-18, we felt that we should be producing the film. And there was also an urgency, because we could have delayed the film a little later in producing it. But then 2018 was also the year when, the government formally announced the change in nomenclature of the city. And we realized that the kind of milieu that we wanted to capture, it was only possible then. So the question was very simple, whether we make it now or we don't ever make it. And that's how we went about it.
And Faraz and Nupur, how was it for you to raise money? What was the back-end process like?
So Faraz and I, we run a advertising production house together. We make ads, and that was the main source for us to start the film. We started investing in the film slowly. We knew what kind of film we were going to make. So we started investing in the right things. I think much before the script was done, we had already collected a lot of artifacts, art stuff that we needed in the film. And the planning was, I think, started in 2016-17. We started planning to make this film without the script. And later in 17-18, Nupur got together with Faraz and they started writing the script. But the desire to make the film was always there. I always wanted to make a film, and I always knew I wanted to make a film with Faraz. We had collaborated on short films before. We have done things before. So I knew how it would be to work with him. And Nupur and Faraz were friends from before. So that's how we were introduced, and we started working on this together.
Nupur?
Yeah, like they were saying, so the film, we didn't even know what the film was ultimately going to look like. But firstly, we knew we wanted to make a film. We knew what the world of the film would be like. So what was smart, I think, was they started doing a lot of planning and a lot of procuring of items, a lot of like planning of when we produce this and when we shoot this, how are we going to do it? How do we save money on this so we can put more money on the screen? So there was a lot of years of planning, even while we were, so Faraz and I think I got involved officially with the film. Faraz pitched me what he had as a script, as an idea in early 2017, I think, at my house in Lucknow. And then, I got involved and we started taking it together and like rewriting the script, and kind of it evolved into so many other things and ultimately into what it is. And even while we were doing that, and as it would become clearer, Faraz Khan and the Going Rogue team were working really hard to, go scout locations. There was like research trips to single screen theaters around the country. There were research trips to go and see locations in Allahabad. And all of that was in a loop, inspiring us as we wrote the script and inspiring us to use those locations and those places, those stories, to tell our story and what we wanted to say. So it was a really cool creative process. And I think it was because we had made the decision early on that we weren't going to shop it around, and we wanted to have creative ownership of the film a lot, which meant, of course, the really tough task of making sure we had all the funding to make the film and get it to the stage. But that also allowed us to get very creative with what we would do with the money we had. And that was years in the planning.
So the next thing that comes to my mind, and in some ways to me, it's a bigger challenge than actually making the film, because sometimes you can just call 20 friends and, say, please come and help me. It's my first film. I'll feed you really good food. And most of us will turn up to help you. But then the problem is, once it's made, how do you get it seen? How do you actually get it out there so that people are walking in, whether it's to festivals or OTTs or theaters? So is that something, and some people would advise that you think from the back to making it, and some people would just say, just make it and then it'll find its path. What approach did both of you take? Ashish?
So I think that's a great question, because I think that's the central problem with independent cinema, both in the US and India. And I think the problem is that, as you rightly said, that you can cobble together the resources, inspire people, and make something. The problem is that once you made it, and that's why I said making the first film, it's almost like you have to be this foolishly crazy person who makes it, and so it gets made. The problem is, what do you do after that? Because that's really the bottleneck. And for us, obviously, the first step was festivals. And so we've been sort of in the festival circuit over the last year or so. So while, actually, let me back up a little. So we were part of NFDC's program called Goes to Cannes last year, where there was an opportunity for us to show a working cut of the film to sales agents, et cetera, at Cannes. We were one of the 5 projects there, and a sales agent from Italy saw the film and came on board to sell the film's rights across the world. So we have that, fortunately, with us. Aside of that, Karthike's had, and I'd let him talk about that, is an experienced producer. And so we obviously, through that, he's been approaching potential partners in the OTT land. But you're raising a very good question. I think the real challenge for independent cinema in India is that, how do you actually get it out beyond the festivals? And so it's great for, that we at least have opportunities provided by festivals like DIFF. But you're right, to get real life for the film is a big question. And I'm as keen to hear people's ideas, and because I really don't know, and I don't have many ideas to give on that front beyond the obvious. Karthike, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I think it's a very complex. Also, the year that we landed up making the film, and that we had the pandemic, and of course the festivals started cutting down in size. They started going online. They really reduced the amount of films they pick up. But of course, because I've done a few films now and they've been to some leading festivals. So, first, I think while you're making the film, of course, I understand that one should concentrate on making the film. But over years, I understand that it really helps that, you know people who are the right people to show the film to. When the film is ready, or when it's in the later stages of its cut. It doesn't mean that they may select your film. And I've also seen that it really varies from year to year, because festivals have their own focuses. They focus on different countries. Sometimes India is very hot, sometimes Africa is very hot. And fundamentally realize, at least in the big festivals, because you land up competing with films from your own country that very year. So it really boils down to that. And, I think at least the big festivals, once they've picked up a film or two, for them to pick up another film from the same country, I think that's a bigger challenge I feel they face, that, oh, should we take another one from India? Or, so, it's very difficult to really put a finger as to what they select any given year. But yes, of course, if you are in touch with the right people, they know about your film, showing the film to the right person is very easy. So Uljan was very difficult for us because in the previous films with Govindo or even with Sony, we were lucky enough to get into the very first festival we wanted to get into. And this was a huge learning experience for me because after we were shortlisted for Venice, but we didn't make the cut, and suddenly, amongst the leading festivals that I knew people, and as it was not working out, we just had to then reach out and show the film to a lot more many people. And it was a tremendous experience because it's not easy. And every year, means how can you really say when you're making the film, what will it be like next year? With every film, it's a different experience. Uh, but yes, means if I had to say something, it's very important, when you go to places like Film Bazaar, or when you take your projects to cinema, or when you have aligned yourself with Sundance, if you've had an early association with the festival, they know about your film, you've been a part of their programs, you of course are putting yourself in a very, very good position as a first-time filmmaker to get your film selected. So yes, I think it's quite complex, and one can pre-plan a lot around it as a strategy. But in our case, I have always, focused on making the film first, and then I hope that when I show it to the people that I know personally well, they will like the film and they'll stand by the film. And that is very key, So I feel that a lot of people and they see a film, but there are a lot of people who sit down and finally select the film. And everybody represents a different region, in a big festival. Somebody is looking at South Asia, somebody is looking at Asia, somebody is looking at Africa. And all the programmers, I feel that they try and get as many films from their region into that small little block. Venice only has Horizonte for indie films. You cannot think of, it's very rare that, that I think it was a great event that, Chaitanya's film was in the main competition, but of course it was backed by somebody also, of a great stature. So yeah, so within that is just one or two slots. Yeah, I think it's very complex, and I think you learn as you go ahead, and you get surprised a lot of times. Yeah. But one shouldn't worry too much about it yet. You should just make the film you want to make, and it's fine. It's okay even if you don't open in the big 5 or big 6. It's okay to open anywhere and for people to see the film and like it. So it's fine. I don't think that one should make a very big deal about a very big festival. It's okay. Yeah.
Faraz, Nupur.
Yeah. So, what I feel that we started planning the film pre-pandemic, and things are very, very different. I think this whole taking the film straight to OTT, or after doing the festival rounds and then taking to OTT has now come, more into conversation. Initially, back then, I think we were still dreaming of taking the film to theater and having a theatrical release and all of that. But as much as we were strategizing alongside, we were also realizing that it so much depends on the fate of the film, that sometimes there are these big studio films and they don't find release, or maybe they find release and they don't work out, or there are these films, obscure ones, and you don't know about it, and from somewhere they come and they find their own path and they go somewhere. So we realized that to make the film we need right amount of intent, right amount of planning, and at the same time we need to be right amount of crazy, because if you're not crazy you won't be able to make a film. To attempt something like this, and midst this time, you can't be, you really won't be able to take the film, sail it through the pandemic, take all sort of we had to take loans and whatnot to make this film, and traditional producers, all of that. But to sail with so much for next 2-3 years, I think it's the intent which is very, very strong that makes you go for those next the journey of 2-3 years. And finally, then you come to realize that what ultimately the journey would be.
Nupur, or can I call you something else, Faraz? Is there a code name I can use for you?
You can call me Ali.
Khan and Ali.
Okay.
There was no Faraz on our set. It was Khan and Ali. Faraz?
Yeah, so like Kartikeya mentioned, we found it difficult to get through the Premiere Film Festival. We had planned that when we were making the film, we had planned that we'll go through the same route. We'll take the film to festivals and then see whether we can find a theatrical release. Midway, we realized that theatrical release is becoming like very difficult and challenging, and we are now looking at approaching OTTs and seeing how that thing would be. But in our pre-planning, we didn't plan it. We wanted to make the film and then leave the film to its fate, and that is where it is right now. And we'll all learn through this process. This is our first film. We'll learn how this thing works out. Like Ashish said, both Faraz, me, and Nupur are curious to see what is the method, what is the way that this all works out. Hopefully, we'll make a second film. We'll know more by then.
Yeah.
The other, go on, sorry.
No, I was just saying, for us especially, I think it was a little bit of a, it hurt us really where it hurts, because, for us, the film that we made is about single screen theaters and the joy of watching films in theaters together. And then thanks pandemic, we haven't been able to see it together in a theater yet. And we don't think, we will be able to do that in the near future. But, look, we make films for people to watch them. Doesn't matter ultimately how they watch it, as long as they watch our films and they get what we're trying to say and they love the film. So we're like everyone's saying, we're figuring it out, because I think everyone is figuring it out in the industry right now.
So for your next films, and I'll pose this to the director, Karthik, sorry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, because I see, everybody is here, is young, everybody is making the first film here. I think it's very important for us to understand two things. One is this, there are a lot of gatekeepers everywhere, so making the film is a different matter. And you find these gatekeepers everywhere. Every festival has its own set of gatekeepers, their own ideas. When you try and distribute the film, and I've also, I released Chauthi Koot in Punjab. And I thought that people will be loving it. They'll be crazy. They will come to watch the film. And, nobody came. I have shown films. I've tried to show Anne Ghoda Dadan and Chauthi Koot to, when I work here, there's a huge Rai Sikh community. So this idea that, and as filmmakers, sometimes we feel that what we feel very passionate about, all the gatekeepers and everybody else will feel very passionate about. And, and it really hurts, because I've tried to even show the people who it was about, who it was for. Yeah. And the sense of engagement is so low. I feel that, for indie filmmakers, the greatest sense of engagement comes from filmmakers. And even for the OTT, you look at the amount of gatekeeping there is, how much things have changed over the 3-4 years that an Amazon and Netflix have been around. They will have a different business strategy, and then out goes certain kind of films, or a certain kind of devaluation happens for certain kind of films. So of course, it's so challenging to be an indie filmmaker, and you guys, we're very brave, to keep, to want to continue to make a second film. I keep telling Ashish, I'm done, no more films now.
Actually, your comment is dovetailing beautifully into what I was going to ask next, which is that because there is, both your films are in a certain vein, appeal to a certain kind of audience. Once you've made the film, maybe it was the first piece of your heart, is the next piece of filmmaking that you do, is it going to be more, I don't know, is it going to be thematically different? Is it, is it because it's harder to reach audiences with your films? Are you rewiring how you see storytelling? And I'm not saying you won't be true to what you are, who you are, but are you rethinking story and storytelling based on experience?
Is that question for me? Because then
it's for all of you, whoever would like to go first.
Means if I had to tell you very honestly, because I've worked with now 3 directors, for me, it's very director centric. It's very, very important that, that I find a deep interest in the director as a person. And eventually my job is to try and help the director make the film that he wants to make. You see, so for me, I've seen, of course, it changes with every person. So, Ashish is different from Ivan. Ivan was different from Gurvinder. And at the heart of it, that is where I try and stick to that. Okay, let's try and help my director achieve whatever he has learned over the years, put it all together, have the confidence, and first make the film that they really want to make. Because I'm okay if the film is not liked by people, it's fine, But what I would never be okay with, that my director turns around and tells me later that, oh, I couldn't make the film that I wanted to make. See, because you, especially in independent films, you never know. It may be the only film they may make.
Yeah.
How many independent filmmakers go ahead and then make another feature, you know? I mean, we are in very good times that so many films get made, you know. I go to Film Bazaar, I see there are 200 films in works in progress. I'm like, that's a lot of money. You know, even if it's 50 lakhs a piece, that's 100 crores, you know. No, most of it will never see the light of day, or most filmmakers will never get an opportunity again. So that's it. That's it for me. And, you know, it's director driven. It's driven by their vision and passion.
So let's hear what the directors,
I completely agree. I feel that, you know, picking up from what you said, Karthik, that gratification of making a film actually happens in stages, and all these gratifications are very different levels of gratification. Gratification of securing the funds, gratification of taking your film and making it, gratification of getting the scenes correct, gratification on the last day of shoot, gratification of fully finishing the post-production the way you wanted to. Taking the film out to people and making it a sociable experience is also one gratification that everybody currently is trying to figure out. But sometimes I ask this question to myself, that what if I'm in this post-apocalypse world and there is nobody there, like I'm Wally and I'm left with a camera, would I make a film? And you know, the answer is nobody would be there to watch it, but I'll still go and make a film because of the gratification of making the film. So, you know, as we go ahead now and we are trying to figure out how many people are going to watch it, there is no certainty. I don't think so. If I'll make the best, I'll put forward the best craft and the best script to my knowledge and experience by far. And would there be a surety that people will turn around and watch it at the festival, or would that make it to festival? I don't think so. There is a surety. But does that discourage us from jumping into making the next one? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It really doesn't. And because we are in the right amount of you know, sensibilities, and we are walking with the right amount of craziness, and that's how we are able to churn out the next film despite of the consequences. Otherwise, we will, you know, deal it like commerce, that what is the return of interest if you're putting it this year, and all those questions we have, you know, as we are going ahead, we are also slowly learning and trying to forget also that this is filmmaking, and you know, it will be full of surprises. Who thought there will be pandemic and, you know, we'll have to struggle for 2 years and I'll have to grade a film sitting in Allahabad while my grading artist would be sitting in Bombay over a laptop where I would have zero sense of colors. But I think that adaptability, that as time goes on, how we adapt the script, how we adapt with the time, how we adapt with the screen. Somebody just yesterday asked me that, hey, it's just going to be so sad to see Shoebox on the laptop. Of course, it is sad, it's hurting. Like, I wish we, you know, at the beginning of the conversation, we discussed that, you know, it's going to be a great experience to physically be sitting together and ideally be watching in the theater. But, you know, we need to also realize that where did we actually see these best of cinema? Did we go to the theater on our laptops? Why are we shying away right now? So I'm saying this adaptability, gratification is all that we need to slowly understand. And I learned it while working with, you know, some of the senior technicians on my film. I had somebody like Mahesh Ane, the DOP of my film, who's such an experienced DOP, and he has shot on films all his life. On my film, he was shooting on red, but you know, he was just so open to the idea of shooting and on a smaller format camera. And that's where, you know, these learning comes from, that as a filmmaker, be it you being a producer or director, need to learn to adapt with time because it's constantly changing. I sometimes I would think of conceive a scene and go there in Allahabad, and I think that entire building is demolished, so we can't shoot it there. So I'm saying that if we don't have that in diegetically those adaptability talents, we won't be able to survive.
Yeah, you know, but I also feel that, means, I'm so sorry, I'm sure somebody wants to add in, but I feel that, you know, I feel it's very important for us independent filmmakers. We must, you know, one of the biggest questions and I've always had is, we must crack this. You must understand, see, there is a commerce attached to filmmaking. A lot of times, you know, you had a decade of independent filmmaking being supported by the state, and then that funding goes away, and then the whole scene collapses. And, you know, what I feel really bad about, I thought that now that things are going digital, maybe indie filmmakers will be able to break this distribution crack this distribution
Yeah.
for indie films.
Yeah.
But we've not been able to. But I think it's very important, means one cannot ignore it, because I'm not saying that, okay, you make a huge profit, but every time your producer makes back the money, you have a much larger chance of getting that money back to make your next film. So at some level, over the years, I do understand that it's very important to give the money a little more respect. Because after all, filmmaking is an expensive art form, right? It requires so much money. People can set up a business in that kind of money and then earn all their life. So, so I
Exactly.
don't know, but we must find solutions, and there's a lot of people making films. Like India doesn't even have a single, I would call a single fully engaged sales agent, right, Ashish? Who represents Indian cinema, takes it out to
Yeah.
the world. I have told government agencies that, oh, you keep putting money in making films. I said, people are crazy enough to find the money and make films, but we need some single point, solidly, passionately focused on taking our films out to the world. Means Europe has so many, China has so many, all over the world, there's so many people whose job is just to take these films and bring it out to the world.
Yeah.
In India, there is not one, not a single one who's fully engaged only on that front. And so we are not.
And it's kind of sad because it's not like there isn't an audience for independent cinema in India. You're seeing that now thanks to OTT. And, I know we kind of wax poetic about like our films being for theaters and things like that. But like Faraz was saying, I mean, if it's a great film, it should be enjoyed wherever people want to enjoy it. And, thanks to so many independent films being sold to OTTs, now we are seeing that people love these films and they don't necessarily have to go see the 100 crore Bollywood, studio biggie. So yeah, we need to figure out the systems in place so that more and more producers will be willing to get engaged and tell the stories that, independent filmmakers want to, because it is hard, writing a film is hard, directing a film is hard, producing it is certainly hard, but the hardest part is recovering the money. And that is where people get discouraged. And if it's very sad if that keeps people from telling the next story that they want to, we lose out on that.
So this is just a trend that I've observed. It's not a deep study, but it seems to me that a lot of people who now make a first independent film and they very rapidly after get picked up as director, writer, creator, showrunners to do work on platforms. Is that something either of you would be open to, interested in? Is it a path that's, that you're willing to tread down, or are you sort of very determinedly independent filmmakers who want to have your voice and make things your way?
I think it's personally speaking, I don't fit in that format. You need to have that kind of tenacity, temperament to be a showrunner, to be thinking in that kind of format, to be thinking of a story which runs for those number of hours. So personally, I don't. Personally, like you do dream in certain duration. My stories and my caliber and tenacity, I think I mostly floats around in the arena of a feature length. So I don't look forward to even, and I don't think so I'm a fit for that.
Ashish?
Yeah, so actually the project I'm working on now is a TV series set in the US that I've just written the pilot and starting to pitch it. So, for me, I resisted television for a very long time in terms of writing it. But, I'm a storyteller and I want to tell stories that matter, that sort of help me solve things that I care about. And the fact is, it's an interesting question because, what really inspired me to get into cinema was the middle cinema that existed in India in the 80s. I used to love those films, the Basu Chatterjees, the Basu Bhattacharya, Rishikesh Mukherjee films, and they kind of died with the arrival of cable TV in India, for instance. Somehow that space was taken by soap opera, which kept becoming more and more soap opera-ish. So you went from Hum Log to Saas and Bahu soap operas, and it sort of evolved in a certain way. So it killed the middle cinema, And that became a vacuum. So what really inspired me to make Uljan, I remember when Karthikeyan I met, I said, I really want to see that middle cinema, sort of character driven, smaller stories, more intimate and stuff like that. And that's kind of disappeared because sort of the mainstream cinema went spectacle. It was larger action dramas and stuff like that. And then you have the cable TV, but you had this space left, where even big actors, known actors would come in and work in those films, which were intimate sort of dramas. But what I realized is what's at least happened in the United States, and I see that happening in India, because India no longer is making, what Netflix has really changed is Netflix has taught the world to read subtitles. That's what it's done. So the biggest market in the world in terms of just the eyeballs and engagement with television time, say the United States, nobody ever read subtitles. It was a very elite thing to watch a foreign film, even though a lot got watched, but they were primarily on the East and the West Coast. Nobody in the middle of the country watched a foreign film. That's changed with Netflix. People are reading subtitles. And so what's happening is even a drama that's being made, say in India, right? And we are living in a world which is very different from the one 25 years back. People want actually culturally specific content. They don't want crossover cinema. They don't want crossover series. What they want is a series rooted in Indian reality. And they're willing to read the subtitles, So I think the opportunities for storytelling are definitely that sort of character driven has moved to television, at least in the United States. And I suspect that's happening in India as well. So there's a big difference between television that is cable TV and television that's OTT. I think they're very different animals. Even though both are seen on television, they're not the same. And so I, as a storyteller, for me, I feel that's doesn't mean I won't write features or I'm not interested in doing features. I just want to tell stories. And, if that's the format where people want to watch, I don't want to compromise with the stories I want to tell. But if that's the format people will watch stories, and then that's fine with me. It's the story that I care about telling. So
yeah, that's how I feel. It's a story. And each of us tells it differently. And that's where each filmmaker's beauty lies, is in the way they tell it. Is there anything else you'd like to add before I open the floor to questions?
Well, I could add finally something on what I feel about OTTs.
Please do.
Of course, we all have always very simplistic but yet very complex views. As much as I agree with Ashish completely, I again feel that what happens is, when for example, when Netflix came into India and when the Indian office was still not in place, and when you send them a certain kind of content, they looked at it from a very different perspective, and the kind of content that was appreciated or liked was of a very different tone and tenor. And, as the Indian office is set up and, we have a whole existing industry with its own biases and ideas of what Indian audiences would like. And I do feel that it's again driven by the two factors. One is, what does that executive sitting on the desk think about what Indian audiences would like? And then that's the same story of gatekeeping. And then, it becomes more about the director trying to convince them, and it kills the opportunity of a surprise. And the second thing is, it has again become actor driven. So, the first thing they want to know, who's your actor? And it is so disappointing, means instead of opening up like that, I feel we thought it will go like this, but it has again come down like this. Now there are a few OTT stars, and the kind of money, means if the kind of money you have to start paying people if you tell them, that you are going to do something for an OTT. So it's just, I think, of course, it's the market and everything which complicates it. I'm absolutely open to doing anything which excites me. But, I would like to do anything which would surprise me. And I hope it would surprise people. And that's the biggest challenge I find. I don't want to start veering again towards ideas of a select few gatekeepers who then get involved at a very early stage of your filmmaking and writing and so on and so forth. And then the formula comes in, and then everybody wants to deliver. It just becomes the same for me.
But arguably, festivals have their own gatekeepers.
Yes, that's what, I feel so disillusioned. You have no idea of me. I don't even want to sell my film to festivals anymore. I was telling Ashish, I'm going to make a film which, means, I find this very challenging now. When I think that we make a film and then that film is going to be judged from the perspective or the eyes of a gatekeeper who may not even belong to my culture.
Yes.
Means how do I say that we are Indians, we want to talk about certain stories and we think certain things are important. And of course, somebody sitting in Europe may not think so because he may not know the nuances of your culture. So how does that person judge what's right or wrong? And the only, a premise that they can do it from is from the light, how they, they understand what is the right story for us to tell. And it is very deeply unsettling and troubling for me, but maybe that's how it is. So
I do want to add something. So I'm based in LA, and that is one of the biggest frustrations I see people having it here, because there's all this talk of diversity and like getting representation and all of that, and that is because they want to be inclusive, but at the same time, the people who are judging what gets made and how it is made and what is being said is somebody who doesn't understand my culture or what life in India is. So, and it's also the other frustration I've seen a lot for filmmakers, or more broadly storytellers here, is that, like there's always, with the OTTs, again, like Karthik was saying, there was a hope that, it would diversify, there would be much more space for taking a chance on unknown content. But, it's always about, which book is it adapted by? Is it already a bestseller? Who is the actor? They tell us, like, don't even bother shopping your script around unless you have either a director attached or an actor attached, and I understand that it's coming back to the same conflict of, we got to respect the money. If we want them to invest $1 million, what are we giving them in return? And I think, so that is a problem that independent filmmakers, it's a dilemma. And, it comes back to, do we just end up being the little subgroup of people who are making films and content that are going to be shown with subtitles, and there's no way for the larger global audience to discover it unless you specifically are looking for it. So it's figuring it out.
Yes, and we have to change the way we see those cultures,
Yeah, exactly.
Mexico is not just narcos. India is not just weddings.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
India is not just Bollywood dancing at weddings or Slumdog Millionaire. That's two giant extremes, and the rest of India exists in between. But
yeah, I think just after finishing this independent film Shoebox, I went to work for an OTT platform. I was working with Oshim. He was
I worked with Oshim as well, yeah.
So he was the showrunner for the show that we were working on. And I feel that it's impossible to make independent films for OTT platforms. There is no flexibility at all. Like Faraz, I think he's logged off or something, but
he said his net is dropped. He's going to come back.
Okay. So there were so many things that we did on the spot, decisions that we took, say, on the day of the shoot, which I think add a lot of value to our film. Those kind of decisions, it's impossible to take when you're working for an OTT. Everything is, say, planned well ahead.
Yeah.
And like everyone said, that the people who are judging whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, or whether we should do it or not, they're just following an algorithm, a process. And it's difficult for them to decide these things. I don't think that any director who's working for an OTT platform is really able to do whatever he wants, even after he signs a mega million deal. It's difficult. It's very difficult unless he has planned everything to the T. And
or he's bigger than them.
Yeah.
The director is
or if he's bigger than.
Yeah, or if it's a star director, yes.
Yeah, like Oshim being the showrunner, he actually gets a lot of things, whatever he wants, but probably a smaller showrunner or someone won't be able to get it their way.
Thank you. I think we're running out of time, so let's just see if people have any questions. Radha, I'll hand over to you for this part of the conversation.
Actually, you can see the tab here on
okay.
the right. Yeah, and maybe you can just take them.
Should I read them out?
Yes.
Okay. Can you share a little about how the process from script to shoot to edit has been for all of you? In each phase, the practicalities of time, budget, production shape the film perhaps in ways that you hadn't imagined. Big question.
Yeah.
We need an hour to answer this.
Yes. Okay, I'll move on because I think we've kind of addressed some of it in bits and pieces.
All of it, yeah.
And this is more for the directors. How important were the specific cities for the stories of both your films? Can you share how you wove the character of the city into both your films?
So in case of Shoebox, Allahabad is a character. So, we could not have imagined, although it resonates the same problem that in the coming few years, a lot of, smaller cities are going to face, that as all of them are collectively aspiring in the name of modernity to be a bigger town, there is unchecked growth, which all of them are facing. So although, there was a possibility of locating or thematically, shaping the film in any other geography, but Allahabad also is so well known to me because I've been born and brought up in that city, and it was more like how I was personally seeing the unchecked growth every visit to that city, how it was unfolding. So I think it came so easy for me. At the same time, it also became so personal. And for the first film, I think it was just the right choice to be exploring the milieu, which is best known to me.
Ashish?
Yeah, so, Uljan can pretty much happen in any town in India and maybe even outside of India in a certain sort of developing country construct. And it's interesting. I was recently at a festival in person in the United States, in the middle of the United States. And one of the audience member asked me that they said, I mean, they've been to India, but they live in the US, and they felt that this is something that could happen in the US, certain parts of US or in Mexico, etc. So that was kind of interesting. But I think the specificity of Lucknow was primarily we tried to bring that in through language. And there are about 4 different dialects or ways of speaking that are used in the film. And every character's dialect reflects sort of the social milieu that the character comes from. So I think, through one was language, which was used, and the other thing was food. And the third thing was music. So we've used 3 different folk forms of music in the film. And it's interesting that we have the same folk song, which I grew up listening to. My mother was a classical vocalist. We use that based on who was listening to it. It was bastardized in a different way. So when it was a ringtone on a maid's phone, it's the same song being, heard with some disco beats, and then there's a fisherman singing it, just a cappella. So it's the same song. And the idea was that we might be consuming culture, all of us, the same thing, but we consume it in a different way based on who we are. And so we tried to sort of lace in all these different aspects of sort of mundane, banal life, but gave them a context based on, which would sort of work towards the theme of the film.
So the next question here, I think we've already answered. Would you be interested in a series, etc.? So this is specifically for Uljan. It shed a lot of layers. It keeps bouncing up and down, sorry. Shed a lot of light on the role of men in societies, especially through the prism of class. Was this something you were consciously thinking of when writing the parts for Shirish and Manoj?
Yeah, I mean, clearly the film deals with aspects of masculinity and how sort of class consciousness might, there's clearly a, intersection of gender roles as well as gender sort of approach towards these issues of class consciousness. And so it's astute of the questioner to sort of link the two. um, you know, absolutely. I mean, those were central to what we were trying to explore. That, I always thought that what would the world be like if there were no women, you know? And Karthik and I would discuss this often and say, wow, that would be one Darwinian dark dystopian world. And what I meant was not women. What I meant was, the feminine quality, the feminine, which doesn't have to be only in a woman, but we might call it feminine or masculine or whatever. Those are labels we give it. But there was a certain, and it was very interesting to explore that through expectations of gender roles, which the film deals with, right? I mean, in a patriarchal sort of certain society, you get defined by your gender. And but what we were more interested in pursuing was certain aspects which tend to, in a more patriarchal society, tend to be set certain expectations in gender. But yes, the intersection of class politics and class consciousness and gender was something very interesting for us to explore in the script.
So the next question is for both the directors. Both your films are political and make very strong points about class, caste, religion, and patriarchy. In the current climate of intolerance and censorship, do you think films need to be more explicit or strategically subversive? What is your individual take? And related to this, how important is it then to work in getting to know your film's audiences? Faraz, do you want to take it first?
Talking about, Shoebox and the politics of Shoebox, I resisted a lot in terms of not letting my morality or my individuality in terms of what I feel politically about the city, because I really have a strong opinion about it. And but the idea was to bring the information and make it an observational piece. The idea was around 2018, how the architectural changes or the political, how things were being manipulated, how to take that forward and show people that how it changes the social fabric. So there could be different ways of seeing this, that how what is the right way or what is the wrong way. But I think that particularly my intent was to show what was happening in the city during that time, rather take sides. And specifically talking about one particular scene where you see a very famous poet, Yash Malviya, who talks about the nomenclature change of the city, and at the same time he is defended by a person leading a different opinion, and he says that the name of the city was very different. The idea is not really getting into taking sides, whether it should be called Allahabad or it should be called Prayagraj, but it was to understand that what are the priorities for the city as it is changing. What is the right meaning of development? Development is not just making a bridge or fixing the roads. So I think that it is not just a political question. It's social in nature, and I think it was a highly, a high time that people must come forward and ask. And especially, it was an independent film, and I had producers like Faraz and Nupur who were convinced with the idea. I didn't have to think too much before jumping into it.
Ashish?
I think for me, I feel like, because the question is, one of the things the questioner is asking is, should you be overt or subversive? And I would say you should be sincere, that's all there is. Because I feel like I sort of vouch for the Tolstoy definition of what is art. And part of that is, art is communication, right? I mean, it is your it is an emotion that you felt, that you express through your medium, and hope that somebody who's never met you experiences that emotion. I mean, to me, that's sort of at least what appeals to me. And that's why it's a two-way sort of communication. That's why this question we've been debating all or talking about all hour, about the importance of having the audience at the other side. Otherwise, it's a frustrated communication.
Right.
And as an artist, it's not complete. And that's why we need audience, right? Even if it's one person, So that's why I think sincerity is so important, because what is lacking in the world today, as we all realize, with the media, and you can't even trust what's written in the newspapers anymore. I think that makes our role as artists so much more important, because we are the people who still have the courage, whether it serves our purpose or not, to be sincere in communicating what we feel. And that's what one wants to really aspire for. And I think Karthikeya, really, I learned a lot from him in this process. One thing he told me before we even set about making, which he didn't talk about himself, he literally grills you for weeks. He called me to Goa and said, let's sit on the script here. You and I'll just be here. And the first thing he did was he kept questioning me, and he said, what's your intent? What he was trying to understand, why do I want to make the film? And he kept saying, intent is all that matters, right? It doesn't matter, whether the script is good, bad, it's exciting, dramatic. And I was like, wow, this is great. It's liberating, because now I can do something that's truthful to me, because he's pushing me to do that, And I think that's such a great lesson I got. And so I would say, don't worry about whether you're overt or subversive or how somebody else is doing it. Just be sincere. And I'm telling you, if you are sincere in expressing what you want to, you will find people who will connect with it.
I mean, I'm envious. It sounds like you found a great producing partner. I think producers are your emotional backbones.
Very difficult also.
Next question. There's a sense of nostalgia in the mise-en-scène and color palette of both films, and how they show UP cities, especially in Shoebox. Was this a conscious choice?
Yes, it was a conscious choice.
Absolutely.
Yeah, in terms of the color palette that we chose, and right in the beginning of the film, you see a lot of mustard in the highlights, and then as we go towards the end of the film, you see it's graying down, and you start to lose the mustard in the film. So I'm saying that there was a very strong color theory that through and through the film that we followed, not just in terms of portraying nostalgia, but beyond that, because we use the allegory of Saraswati in the film. And the film opens with Saraswati Puja. And, during my childhood, most of these Bengali households that I went to in Allahabad, I witnessed the kind of Saraswati Puja that used to happen. And everybody used to be like, dressed in this mustard tone, and which was the color of fertility, happiness, and so much. So, I saw that kind of Allahabad, and the kind of Allahabad that I'm seeing right now, where the diegetic colors are, like garish pink and all of that. So, putting all of that together and tying in one verisimilitude of a film was a challenge. But then we chose, certain colors, and we retain that throughout in the film, so that we can tie it together. So while the film starts with a lot of, hues of yellows, it slowly fades to the grays and blues. And all of that was a conscious choice in terms of portraying a certain kind of emotion or justifying the theme of the film.
Ashish?
Yeah, so we didn't, nostalgia was not on our table, but the color scheme of the film was, because the film is really about a woman becoming a mother, just not in a way she thought would happen. And the color palette was, thematically reflecting her internal journey. So the movie begins, in the first half, till she invites these people into the house. With our production designer, the cinematography department, Prashant and Satish, who are great production designers, my sort of missive to them was, I don't want any colors of life, which are green, yellow, red for me. orange. They should be, the screen should be devoid of them. And as she brings this family into the house, you start seeing those colors appear. The first thing, the green appears, then the yellow, and the windows start opening and you start seeing sunlight coming in. So the idea was, how do we take these sort of visual elements to reflect the internal journey of the woman character in the film? So that really is what drove our color choice.
And her wardrobe, actually, I noticed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I feel that Ashish has a lot of nostalgia of people because he's been away for so long. How he remembers people, relations, that kind of a nostalgia I think he has, and the way he looks at characters as how they would talk and behave or how they would respond. So I do feel that he has a lot of personal nostalgia with the city, tremendous amounts of it. So it was good fun.
I think he's much like his female character, actually. Just based on the last hour.
Yeah, his personal relationships and stuff. The surprising thing is that I actually also belong to Lucknow, though I had never lived there.
Oh.
And my father's house is in Lucknow, and I was in a boarding school. Then I was in Bombay, and I really never knew my city at all. I went at the age of 6, I was shunned out. So for me, one of the biggest reasons I was like, let's do this film. I was like, at least I'll go back to my city and get to know the city a little bit. So there's no nostalgia. After 25 years or 30 years, it was time to get to know your city. So yeah, it was quite something. Opposites. Yeah.
So what is a film that you recently saw that surprised you? Second last question.
I can go. I recently rewatched, actually. I'd seen it a long time back, but I just thought it was such a wonderful film to watch. But today is a film called Dogtooth. It's the first film of Yorgos Lanthimos, the Greek director. I think it's a fantastically horrifying film. It's horrifying, but I think fantastic film for today's times.
I ended up watching Feathers yesterday, just last night, and I am just still absorbing the film, and I'm still whatever the way the entire script was weaved, the tonality of the film, colors, cinematography, everything. So yeah, that is just one film that I just watched last night, and it's still very much in my mind.
And the very last question, and probably the most appropriate, what was a failure lesson that you learned while making your first films? This is open to everyone.
Well, as a filmmaker, I can tell you, every time you watch a film, all you see is failure. So I don't know where to begin. It's like the most harrowing experience. But in all sincerity, I would say I of course there's things you learn how to do better, and you always that's how you grow, being self-critical and all that stuff. But I think the one advice, if I could give myself, and I was very lucky again on that front, but I would really advise people very, very carefully, is partner with the best team you can, which means right from the producer to all the way down to crew members, because as we all know, being filmmakers on this thing, filmmaking is a collaborative medium. I mean, we are here, Karthik and I are here, but clearly we didn't make the film, right? I mean, it was impossible. So your life will become a hell or heaven based on who you're working with. And there's one decision that decides that, and it's who you're working with. So just be super careful. And I feel like sometimes we're in such a rush, to do, and some, just go on, just do it, that we don't take that into account. And I would say it's better to just wait, and find the right collaborators for yourself. That's what my advice would be.
I think I agree with the right collaborators, but we had a very interesting decision to make because of the rush, because, we couldn't have shot the film 2 years later because it would be Prayagraj, So there was a moment where we were like, do we want to be safe or do we want to be crazy? And we obviously chose the little bit crazy route. But the lesson that did looking back come from it is plan for the next stage, not just for shooting your film. You know, have in mind what you want to do for post-production, have in mind what you're going to do with the film once it's released, who you want to send it to, who do you want to watch it? Because I wish we could have had the liberty to, you know, maybe spend more time thinking about it and strategizing about it and raising funds for it. And of course, no one could have predicted the pandemic, but even then, but those are the things that, like Ashish was saying, there's sometimes such a rush because, you know, you want to make your film and you want to get to it. And that's the exciting part. But for filmmakers, that's right after that ends is the slump, you know, and that's where a lot of people then just lose their way. So I think that's equally important.
Yeah, I mean, the failure happens every day. Like ever since the time we decided to make the film, every day we woke up and there was one thing which was failing. And anything or everything that you can imagine that you must have heard about things going wrong on the set has happened on our set. Post that also, it's been happening. So failures, ultimately, you know, it sort of becomes part of your life and you learn to live with it. And I think now, as I'm learning this from my first film, that you need to have a certain amount of appetite for failure because you cannot miss it. The failures would happen. As we was beginning to shoot the film and we had just the right amount of fun to finish the principal photography, 2 days before shooting the film, we got a call and our protagonist, Amrita Bagchi, she lost her mother. We were stranded. We didn't know what to do. Our heart was completely invested into making the film with her. But you know, for the next 10 days, we just didn't know what to do. We were just standing there. Ultimately, a lot of things on set also, like, you know, in terms of the schedule, because of that, it moved. We shot the film. Immediately after that, I was hospitalized during the pandemic for a very long time, and I couldn't finish the post-production exactly the way I wanted back then. Ultimately, thankfully, I got more time and I could do the sound design. I could, but failures happen every day. Self-criticism, as Ashish spoke about, like, you know, I would say, and I'll be like, I should better die and not do this again in my life. That kind of things keep happening, but you know, the intent, if you have the right intent and that's in the right place, you will ultimately make the film that you want. It was very difficult for us to choose a kind of film with a kind of political bone, but then it was also very necessary to talk about the time while living in that time with the sincerity that Ashish spoke about. So yeah, failures. We are failing every next day. There is some timeline that we miss out on. One hard drive just recently crashed. All kind of failures happen, but you need to sort of brave it.
But you're also succeeding, which is why we're here.
Yes.
So, you know, keep at it.
Makes it worth it.
And thank you very much.
What at any given point in time you think is a failure could be something that lands you into great success later. So I would tell filmmakers to take it easy on themselves, you know, take every day at a time. I see a day on shoot also just another day in life, and you know, but whatever happens, it's such an amazing experience. So I think one should take it easy on themselves. It's fine. You know, go with whatever happens and comes your way. What else?
I'll come see you in Goa, Kartikeya, soon.
I know, right? I want to be your first AD.
This sage advice.
No, but you know, really, what can you do? You know, means you just should be relaxed and enjoy it. You know, it happens.
Yeah.
Okay, on that note, thank you all very, very much. This was lovely. And good luck with all your projects.
Yes, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Radha, anything for the end?
Nothing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Lovely
Thanks.
being with you guys.
Lovely meeting you all.